Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back and listening to the podcast. You know, when I started this podcast, I really was thinking about ways to help more parents access information so they can make better decisions about how to support their children. I wanted to provide help, but I also wanted to provide hope. Well, today my guest is Dr. Rita Eichenstein, and I'm so thrilled that she's here today. She is the author of an award-winning book called Not What I Expected: Help and Hope for Parents of Atypical Children. Dr. Eichenstein is a licensed psychologist with postdoctoral training in pediatric neuropsychology and special education. I love Dr. Eichenstein because she's a practical, interactive, and solution-focused clinician. Her approach is to provide practical information, diagnostic support, and practical feedback to help her clients resolve current challenges. Dr. Eichenstein is here today, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Dr. Eichenstein, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Finally, we get to talk.
I know. We've talked so much informally at luncheons and dinners and in our own group of colleagues. So it's great to have this opportunity to speak about the work that we do and the work that we love.
Absolutely. Love is the word.
Absolutely. You know, we're both pediatric neuropsychologists. We both evaluate children and adolescents, and parents bring their kids to us because they don't know what's happening. They're noticing things, they're noticing struggles, they've observed difficulties, and those difficulties are making it hard for their kids to kind of navigate school, navigate friendships. And I just thank you for the work you're doing because it is so important. And
thank you for the work you're doing.
And it's hard. A lot of parents have a hard time kind of just engaging in this process. So I'd love to talk about, you know, when people come to you, when they make that first reach out to you, what are some common reactions of parents to the process to begin with? And then we'll kind of go from there.
Well, Karen, that is such a wonderful question that I wrote a whole book about it.
Yes.
So, because I noticed that over the years of doing that, there's like patterns. There's patterns, there's different parents have similar reactions. So parents, first of all, the whole parental group, parents as a group, they tend to feel quite isolated. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of perceived stigma that isn't exactly true, but in a parent, when you have a child who isn't developing the way you think they should, there are common reactions to that. But the first one is fear and anxiety. There is nothing about parenting that's rational, as I say. And
that is true.
We may all be brilliant in our own fields, or we may all, have gotten to this adult age. But yet, when it comes to being a parent, it's a first time road, and nobody is prepared for what they're going to get. So I wrote the book, Not What I Expected, because this is so common for parents. So the first thing to know when parents call me is so many times they say, maybe I'm crazy. Or my pediatrician thinks I'm crazy, or my husband thinks I'm crazy, or my wife thinks I'm exaggerating. But I feel that something is off with my child, or we just want him or her to be happy. How do we get a happy child? And I echo that. That's right. The goal is not that your child needs to win a Nobel Prize by the age of 12. Our goal is to get him to be a happy 25-year-old. That's the journey, and you need support. People need support. This is not the village concept is over. We don't live in the 1950s where we can open the door and send them out to play and then sit on the stoop and talk to other parents. That's over. What we now have is Dr. Google, which is terrifying. So if parents are going to go online, they're going to be terrified. So a lot of times parents call me and they're terrified and they're too scared to ask the real question, which is, does my child have autism? Does my child have ADHD? Have we messed up our kid? Am I a terrible parent? Those are the subtexts of the questions. The other parents are saying, I see my kid is struggling in school. He's a good kid, but he's just miserable. What should we do? Should we switch schools, or is there something we could do to support him? The stakes are very high, or at least it's perceived that education is a high stakes game with an end goal in mind. Now, as professionals, we know that is absolutely not true. But in the cocktail parties and the social groups, it's who's walking first, who's talking first, who's reading first. Which schools are your kids going to? Oh, homework's too easy. Oh, homework, and everyone's ashamed to say, well, my kid can't handle the homework. It's too hard. But the bragging rights that accompany parent groups are demoralizing. So when parents first call me, they almost don't know what to ask. And so framing the conversation from the beginning starts the evaluation. Like, what are we looking for? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so important because like you're bringing up, there's so many feelings behind what the parents are asking, what they're seeking. There is fear in terms of what could this be? Maybe they've already had conversations with their peers about, the struggles their child is experiencing, or they're noticing that their child is struggling in a way that other kids are not. And that brings up a lot of feelings, either because they themselves had similar difficulties, which you've probably seen with some families.
Yes, of course.
Yes. And then the stigma, like you talked about, because, we're observing our kids relative to other kids, and we're noticing some differences, and that can be scary for some parents.
Absolutely. So what I really want to make clear is even though we're professionals with huge degrees, we are also human beings. And I believe that, and we know this to be true, that what makes us human is our diversity. Our differences unite us. Everyone is different. I applaud the different brain because I know that that's what most of us are. We are different brains. We are unique. If we weren't, our uniqueness is what plants us on this planet and helps us reach our potential. So every parent that's worried that their child is different, I applaud the difference. Let's find it. Let's celebrate it. There are superpowers, as I say, and there are construction zones. And that's it. A child is like a little tree growing into be its full capacity to bear fruit. Let's see what kind of fruit this kid is going to bear. So it's okay to be different. It's normal to be different. It's expected.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that there has been that shift in valuing difference, in celebrating difference, because, we are trained, the way we are trained is to pathologize difference when, there's a pattern of strengths and weaknesses in all of us. For some of us, their weaknesses can get in our way more than others. But in order for children, adolescents who are experiencing differences in the way they learn and the way that they think and the way they interact with others, there has to be an appreciation of who they are. You said we're human beings first. And then also recognizing that some will need more support than others, which is why parents go down the route of doing an assessment, whether that's through the school, through their pediatrician, at their community center, or in a private practice.
That's correct. So sooner or later, parents find us one way or another. But as you said, there are a lot of options. But when the parents come and they are looking for an evaluation, I started, and we're trained to do what we do, which is examine the child, spend time with the child, do testing, do the feedback for parents. And after a while, I started to wonder, Karen, what happens next? Because the parents, we don't necessarily follow up because it's not part of the plan. Like what happens inside their brain, inside their emotions? How do they follow up? So I got curious and I started to look for literature because surely there was something that would talk about the parents. And I discovered something incredible, Karen. It's still to me hard to believe that we all know there might actually be 1 million parenting books right now out there. How to raise a happy child, how to raise a spirited child, the mindful child. We have all that. But there is nothing until my book that actually talked about inside the brains of parents. How are they thinking, feeling? What is the grieving process like? How do you manage your emotions? And I'll talk about the different stages, but I dug a little deeper and I said, this can't be real. And I looked at all of our developmental theorists that we hold in such esteem, and I discovered the most amazing thing, that becoming a parent, which for parents know is one of the most, if not the most profound experience in their life. There is no described stage of development that describes parents. And so it was a big oops of the 20th century. And I'm trying to make sure that at least the 21st century, we are going to have nomenclature to describe what happens to parents. Because now with brain scanning, we're finding that the actual architecture of the brain changes as you become a parent. Now, intuitively, parents know this. They totally know that their brain does not operate similarly to their same age peer who's not a parent. It's just, we all know this intuitively. But what about our profession? What about psychiatry? Any profession, psychology, any of the helping professions? Do they actually have literature that describes how to treat a parent professionally? Well, I'll save you the head scratching because the answer is no. The answer is no. It hasn't been in there yet.
Right.
So, shocking.
It is shocking. Because like you said, parents know that they've changed. Parents will say, I'm not the same person. And I would love for you to talk about the neurobiology behind the parent experience, because that is directly related to how they react when they get information about their child and their child's struggles.
That's right. So without geeking out too much about brain development.
I want to geek out. I want to geek out.
I know we're dying to geek out, but we would lose a lot of our audience if we would.
So let's not do that.
But so the neurobiological changes basically that accompany parenthood form the most fundamental and important stage in human development. So basically the architecture of the brain, I'll just talk about a few different neuronal connections that rewire. Not only the hormones, well, we know about hormones. When you become a mother, your hormones change. But did you know that when you become a father, your hormones change as well? So it's all that delicious oxytocin, which is the love chemical, that increases in both genders. And this is not necessarily biological parents either. These are adoptive parents. These are gay parents. These are all people who become parents. There are oxytocin increases in the male or the identified breadwinner type person of the family. There are vasopressin increases. Vasopressin is a male hormone. Think Papa Bear taking care of the dead. So their vasopressin increases. In women, biological women, we know about prolactin, and of course, estrogen. So the brain of a parent with a baby is equivalent to the brain in love. Mm-hmm. And they've done, it's not just me saying that one. They've done research on that. And so this love feeling is quite profound. Unfortunately, that only lasts for a certain amount of time. The breadwinner goes back to work, whatever, and the main caregiver has those hormones for a little longer. Everything wears off sooner or later. And roughly by the time the child starts to assert themselves, which is around age 2 or 3, a lot of that hormonal optimism and love has worn thin, and you're stuck trying to figure out what to do with your kid. So it's accompanied by emotion. And one emotion is grieving, because you had this idealized baby that you were imagining since you were expecting, or even before. The minute you talk about wanting a child, and by the way, men have baby fever just like women do. It just shows up in different directions. The minute you start having this incredible surge of those hormones and loving, and by 2 or 3, they're worn thin. And you have to come to grips with the difference between your idealized child and who your child is actually trying to become. And that's always a split, maybe not a 2 or 3. But children are sort of wired to disappoint, if I may say that very tentatively.
Tell us what you mean by that, because I can see some people listening and their ears are kind of...
Yeah, on their road to becoming their unique person, there's a separation and individuation journey.
Yes, absolutely.
And part of that journey is pushing away mom and dad. Bye-bye. I'm doing this my way. And children are not clones of us. They're not, they're unique, and on their journey to be their authentic selves. We get hurt, we get disappointed, we get lonely. These are human feelings.
Absolutely. And those feelings that you're describing are with our parents' experience with all kids, whether or not they experience difficulties, because, as kids begin to do things themselves, there's also that sense of loss. Oh, you don't need me to tie your shoes. You don't need me to walk you across the street. And so there is a little bit of loss that parents experience during those times as well, even with typically developing kids.
Right. And then on the other hand, and there always is another hand, with atypically developing kids, some who are profoundly dependent on their caregivers, the disappointment goes in the other direction. Am I going to have to do this for the rest of their lives? What's going on here? When is this child going to ever be independent? And the mind starts to race forward in ways that are not healthy, not good for the psyche. And so we get all kinds of kids. So let's focus on the atypical child for a minute. And because it's true, not every kid is atypical. Each kid is unique, but we do have kids that are more atypical than others. And those atypical ones, you're going to notice either depending on the age, because Dr. Wilson and I mean, we see kids from, I don't know how young you start, but up till, the 20s. So along the journey, you're going to notice. And so whatever age you start worrying, the worry brain starts to take over. And there's repercussions. We all have worry brains. Worry brains were designed evolutionarily to protect us from the charging rhino in the distance, or to keep our family safe. So our parent worry brain is there for a reason. And when our children are atypical, the parent worry brain starts to run. And if you're a parent that has a worry brain that's running at 3 a.m, know that you're not alone, but have a little pad of paper next to your bed and write it down. And the next morning, take care of it. Reach out to your pediatrician. Find someone you can talk to about it. Talk to your child's teacher. Talk to the doctor. Talk to the specialist about what you're worried about. Because I'll tell you, I've learned to trust parents' Geiger counters. And you're not worrying for no reason. There is a reason. You might be worrying for the wrong reason, but let's find out, and let's see if we can take care of it. Identify it, educate you, and help you on your way. It's not that easy. Parenting is messy. Life is messy. But the phases that I've come to understand, the first one is after this grieving process, the first phase is denial. And I equate it to being in a supermarket and you're standing in line or whatever, and someone steps on your toe. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go into sort of shock, like, wait, what? And, or you're in the doctor's office and they come in and go, okay, look, we're concerned. And there's the deer in headlights reaction, which is the freeze response, which is either you don't hear what they're saying, it's all a blur, or you hear through muffled water. There's movie clips on this, so I always say, write it down, or audio tape, videotape, because you're not going to remember it. You're just not going to remember it. You think you are. Your logical brain is telling you, That's what the doctor or the pediatrician will see. They're not hearing. They're not absorbing. For the most part, some of you, will be, but denial is, if you're not in denial, chances are your spouse or the other caretaker is, someone's in denial. There's upsetting the homeostasis in the family that's getting shook right now. And that can be very scary. And, after denial comes anger. So after the guy steps on your toe and, you go into shock for a second, your first reaction is, hey, buddy, you just stepped on my toe. Luckily we have a lovely frontal lobe that covers our emotional system that keeps us from losing our cool when we're in a grocery store. But parents who are in the hyperprotective mode, I'm looking at you dads because testosterone plays a little role in this. The anger shoots out, and the vasopressin, you're Papa Bear, and your cave is being disrupted from the outside. You have an external doctor that's telling you that they know something about your kid that you don't know. And that's tremendously threatening. And so a little hidden secret among, let's say, schools or some professionals that work with kids, not myself and not Dr. Wilson, but is that a lot of people who specialize with children say, I love the children, it's the parents I have trouble with. And what they don't understand, and why this is so incredible to understand the parent response, is this is another step in the grief response. The anger is parents trying to protect their child. They're trying to protect their homeostasis. They have to learn to trust. And so far, the only people they know who knows their kid as really well is themselves. And sometimes this can come out of the blue. So anger is a very serious repercussion. And I urge anyone who is having anger problems or who has a spouse or another caregiver with anger problems to get them help, because anger is tremendously damaging to the child. And so the vulnerable victim in all this is the child, who is atypical, who's the circle of the storm, the eye of the storm. So let's take care of that little child, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you kind of walked us through a lot of information. And I think it's important because, one, I think it's important to validate the parent's experience and all of the feelings that you've described, the denial, the anger, there's sadness, there's feelings of loss. All of those are valid feelings that parents have. And it's up to us, when we're meeting with parents, is to kind of walk them through our findings, but we do it with compassion. We do it with empathy. We do it with understanding what this means. But then also it's also part of our job to instill hope, because we know that there are a lot of things that we can do to support kids who are wired differently, but we won't know how to support them until we know and we've identified what the cause of that struggle is, which is what I always say.
Well said. So the next phase that parents will go to is seeking solutions, otherwise known as bargaining in the class, seeking solutions. So I hear what you say, but I'm going to do my own search because this is my kid. And so the first thing they're going to do is go to Dr. Google. And folks, it's the Wild West out there. Be careful what you find. You're going to find everything. And, these poor kids. And, so I do encourage parents to listen to the people that you've sought help with. Now, there are a few parents that, and I write about them in my book, that have the means to hire researchers or to do the research themselves. But these are professionals. There was a movie, Lorenzo's Oil. They found the cure. So it's not that you can't find it. It's that you have a life to live. And we've spent our lives looking for solutions. Try ours first. Do yourself a favor, because the herbs and the mini mall pop-ups that promise they will change your child's brain in 6 weeks, there's no research for them.
And that's really important. That's really important because we want parents to use evidence-based interventions. We want what we mean by that is that there's research to support that this is effective. But like you said, if you go on Google, you'll find everything in terms of what would work for whatever diagnosis or whatever struggle your child is experiencing. So I'm hearing what you're saying, that's important to rely on experts who can really speak to, what is needed after you have a diagnosis or after you've identified why your child is struggling. But as you talked about those stages of denial, of anger, of bargaining, of sadness, for some parents, it takes longer to get through those stages than others. For some parents, the denial will last, a couple days and they're over it. Others, it could last months until they come to the point where it's just like, he really does have ADHD. Now I'm seeing it, right?
Or it could last a lot longer. Yeah. So the split in the family system is very common, unfortunately, where one parent has one opinion and another parent has another opinion. Let's get together. Let's educate each other, because the most important thing for your child is to have a united front and very, very positive, encouraging. There is just two more phases to talk about, and that one is depression. Yeah, one is depression. After all the seeking and the searching and the education, you are going to reach times where it's just darn depressing. That's normal. That doesn't mean you shouldn't seek help. I'm not trying to normalize the pain away, but it is normal. And what I say in my book is, are you depressed or are you being oppressed? Is the relentless caregiving getting to you? Is it just too hard? I mean, research on parents with children of autism is that their level of cortisol and even PTSD symptoms is equivalent to a combat soldier. So it's okay to seek help for yourself. You are not selfish to seek help for yourself. You are self-caretaking. And that is very important. I know everyone's talking about self-care, but it's most important for parents of atypical children to care for your own needs, because you're not a full-time caregivers without breaks will burn out. So I'm sending the message with love and compassion. Take care of yourself. If you don't know how, I know even Regional Center offers respite care as one of their options. So ask for it. Get a neighbor or anything you can. And this was where I talk about get your team together. You cannot do this alone. Rather than a village analogy, I call it an army. You are the commander-in-chief of your army, Team Joey. Okay? It's the Joey war. We're going to win it. Go Joey. And we're going to hire whoever we need, whoever we want to take care of yourselves, to take care of Joey. And after a neuropsych evaluation, you will get a list of referrals of people, but that's just a starting point. You'll learn from others in your situation. You'll get names of people, but taking care of yourself. And the final stage, and these aren't linear stages, by the way. They're just phases that you can fall into at any given moment. even from 1 minute to the next. You could have a good morning where they go to school and you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. You know what? I think we're okay. I totally think we're okay. It's going to be clear sailing from now. And then the kid comes home and has a mega tantrum and you're plunged right back into depression and anger and, oh my God, so the phases are cyclical in a way. But acceptance is the ultimate phase. It doesn't mean that the problems are gone. Acceptance happens inside of you where you go, okay, I get it. I totally get it. This is who he is. And this is how we're going to have to roll. And you know what? It's going to be okay. You can hold two feelings on your heart at the same time. One is love and joy of the child you have. And one is a little heartbreak that they're going to be different, that they are a little different, that they have struggles, that they are going to struggle a little bit. And that's okay because that is the heart expands to accommodate all sorts of feelings. So work on keeping the joy and acceptance at the top of your goal list to get there. It has nothing to do with your child. It has everything to do with, and you don't have to work too hard because just work on your positive attitude and keep that little list next to your phone. You can also develop a 911 list, which is who can I call when I need help? This could be your best friend. This could be a therapist. This could be anyone. Start your 911 list and have it when you need it.
Right. And that joy and acceptance is really what so many parents aspire to be. That's where they aspire to be. Because, ultimately, if you think about starting this process, when they start the process of an evaluation, when they're observing their child, they want their child to be happy, right? And when you accept your child for who they are, that alleviates not only your anxiety, but your child's anxiety, which contributes to their happiness as well.
Oh, that's true. You might have a Geiger counter about your child, a very sensitive gut response to who they are. They have their own Geiger counter to how much you're approving of them or disapproving. We have to be really careful because this is a teeny tiny soul who's developing and emerging. And so when they see those disapproving looks, they take it into their hearts really deeply. Even children that you don't think have that reciprocity, you'd be surprised.
Yes.
They do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not always what you say. Like you said, they can pick up on all of those nonverbal cues, all of those, the ways that you look, your eyebrows pointing up a certain way. All those nonverbal behaviors send messages to your child in terms of, that approval and that disapproval, or even the parent's feelings of loss, of anger, of sadness. And so I think it's important for parents to be self-aware.
Yeah, totally. I mean, most kids, their number one terror is that their parents are mad at them or that they're the cause of their problems. And kids are very egocentric by design, and they will personalize everything. If you're crying, they're going to wonder if it's something they did.
Yes. Yes. And that's when it's important for the parent to have those conversations with their child. And really, you're conveying that you understand that they're struggling. You're also validating their experiences. I know this is hard for you, and I'm going to do what I can to support you. And again, that alleviates some of the stress, some of the anxiety that the child is experiencing because they realize that the parent sees them, hears them, and is willing to help.
Right. It's so important what you just said. I see this is hard for you and I'm here for you. You're not alone. We're going to help. We're going to get help. We're going to, don't say we're going to fix it.
Right.
We're going to help you move through this.
Yeah. And that's part of that acceptance. It's not that, your attention problems are going to go away, right? It's not that reading is going to magically become very easy for you. So we want to be realistic, but we also want, again, to convey the information with compassion and empathy and instill some hope that, this is going to get better. We're going to make make things as easy for you as we can, or we'll make things easier for you than they are right now, right? And oftentimes the difficulties don't entirely go away. Of course, it depends on what it is.
Right. It's so interesting because many parents say, well, what do I tell my child before I bring them in? And it's like, well, first of all, I've written a pre-intake letter for the child. But beside that, it's no secret that the child is struggling. It is not a secret. If you're so concerned, imagine how your child feels.
Right. Right. And I think that another thing to think about is when parents get the information from you after you've done your evaluation, you conveyed the results, and there might be some denial. And in some parents, there can actually be some relief because now there's a reason for the behavior. Now I have an explanation. Now I have kind of a roadmap of what to do. So there are a lot of different feelings that parents can experience. And I think the other thing is important that every parent will experience it in a different way, right? You can have two parents who both hear that their kids have ADHD and they can respond to it very differently.
Oh, absolutely. And there's no way to predict it. You can't even predict it inside yourself, how you're going to respond. I mean, to us seasoned clinicians, ADHD is a pretty common normal variation, very common. Variation of human behavior that gets in the way because our society is so rigid and structured. But for a parent, again, to hear that they have something with a D in it, the disorder, attention deficit disorder, nobody likes a diagnosis. Even something, nobody likes it. It's awful that your child has a diagnosis. On the other hand, we can comfort you with statistics, how many kids are going to get a diagnosis. Most of the private schools here in LA, who can cite the statistics, the private schools are up at like 18%, 20%. And I don't know that the public schools, well, you can look at the demographics that each disorder has. I mean, ADHD is 14%. I frankly think it's higher than that. Dyslexia, they say, is 1 in 5. Autism, every time I look at the numbers, it's going up, up, up. I think it's 1 in 45 now. So these numbers are increasing. We don't know why, but we know that we need to take care of these children so that they grow up to be confident and adults who can really function well.
Absolutely. So what do you say to parents what's kind of your overall message to parents whose kids are wired differently?
That's a great question. Okay, I've got a lot of messages. Number 1, don't give up. Wiring differently is the most human, authentic expression of who they are. And there are both superpowers as well as construction zones to your child. And the discovery of all of them are equally magnificent. And love your child. You cannot tell them you love them enough. Hug your child. Let them know that life is good. Be an example of living a positive life despite maybe something that you have. I mean, we all have stuff. If you have ADHD or you have dyslexia or you're on the spectrum, let them know that life is good, that you can form a great, authentic life. If you're with a partner, love that partner. Be very visible in loving them. Let them know that they have a wonderful life ahead of them.
That is wonderful. And I think those are great things to share with listeners, with parents. And I would encourage everyone who has a child who is struggling, who may have received a diagnosis, to really pick up your book, Not What I Expected, because it's excellent and it's hopeful, it's helpful. And I'm so glad that you wrote it. And it was just such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And again, I appreciate all the work that you are doing.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And what is the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to know more about the work that you do, if they are seeking an evaluation for their child?
Right. So I have a website. It's drRitaEichenstein.com. I can spell that. Unless you have show notes, that makes it easy.
I do have show notes, so I will put it right in the show notes.
All right. And my book is called Not What I Expected, Help and Hope for Parents of Atypical Children by Rita Eichenstein. And you can find it on Amazon, and shoot me a note if you like it.
Wonderful. And I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. And take care, parents out there. Sending love.
Make sure you check out the show notes for today's episode. We have given you links to articles and podcast episodes about the assessment process, what that looks like, and also how to seek an assessment through your school district. And if you are in the Los Angeles County area, you can go on to childnexus.com, search a provider, and find psychologists and clinical psychologists who can help identify the unique profile of your child, strengths and weaknesses, and develop a plan to help your child thrive. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.